I have always loved reading books. I have loved this activity since childhood, starting with children's fairy tales. Then growing up, I moved on to more adult themes. I cannot say what exactly I like themes. I read almost everything, just as long as I like, as ordinary works of fiction, detectives, and thrillers. The only thing I remember is that when in school we were assigned to read Gogol's Dead Souls, I fell asleep reading in the chair literally on the second page. For some reason, this particular work did not impress me at all, but on the contrary, I fell asleep. Maybe because of its monotony, or maybe I was just a teenager at the time and I was literally not interested in such things, but I never took up reading this book again. Recently, though, I saw an advertisement on a website about a movie with the same name, and I wondered if it was an adaptation of that book or just a movie that got a similar title. But I can say that from the first minutes I liked the movie, it was a horror movie. And I realized that it had nothing to do with Gogol. And still, besides watching movies on TV, I prefer to spend time by the fireplace with an interesting book. I also like those on which the movies were made. And most of all, I can honestly admit that I like to read science fiction because the usual life stories and so got in real life. But when I ran out of books of my favorite genre, then went to love novels, although I thought that this is more suitable for the female half of the readers. My wife Bridget was not against my hobby, although she herself was not an avid reader, and preferred to read all sorts of, in my opinion, nonsense on the internet. And while I was flipping paper pages in my soft armchair, she was turning the pages of the internet in search of something interesting. Why do you keep poking at those books? They're so last century. I bought an e-book, especially for you. You can find everything you need for free. She didn't always approve of the fact that I bought many of the books because the library didn't have much choice for me to read. And the books that I bought I neatly stacked in the closet, which was allocated specifically for this purpose. And many of the shelves were already full of long-read books, and Bridget often commented her dissatisfaction quietly aloud that she had to wave a rag over the accumulated waste paper. You should be doing something useful instead of your books. Yeah? Like what? I go to work and I make a lot of money. Have you ever complained that you don't have enough for anything? No. But you could still do something useful around the house. Like what? Even just mow the lawn. Is that so hard for you? No, it's not. But I work very hard mentally and I'm entitled to a vacation. And for everything else, you can hire someone who's trained to do it. And in a way, we can help those in need. You're unbearable. You're impossible to argue with. That's just the way I am. You didn't marry me for anything, did you? Oh, Dwayne, you're so... What? What? Oh, all right. Let's go to dinner. I've already set the table. What are we having tonight? I put the book down on the coffee table. Just the way you like it, pasta with a side of meat. And very vitamin salad. I followed my wife into the kitchen, and it smelled delicious. I sat down in my favorite chair, drooling with appetite as I waited for Bridget to put a portion on my plate. She'd always tried to treat me to a good meal, and she'd even taken a cooking class a few years ago, and she'd made up the rest of the dishes herself, experimenting with the food in the kitchen. We lived like this for many years, and she was never disappointed in me, except that she sometimes reproached me for being too fond of reading books. But I'd always found it useful to read paper books, and electronic screens I thought were bad for my eyesight, and the process of turning pages gave me great pleasure. Dwayne, don't you think I'm getting a little fat? She asked me at dinner. No, I think you look very nice. Why? Well, you can see I put on a lot of weight over the years. What are you talking about? I'm not saying that cooking on the stove is bad for me, but every time I cook, I have to taste everything, and that just adds calories. Bridget, honey, I love you just the way you are, and don't worry about your figure flaws. So there are flaws? Well, don't mince words. I didn't mean to offend you. She chewed a piece of juicy meat, drank some juice, and continued. Still, I'd like to look more perfect than I do now. I just gave her a questioning look. I read in the ads that there's a fitness club nearby, and it's pretty inexpensive. I want to sign up and take some classes. Is that really necessary? Yes, Dwayne. I want to do it. You're doing your books, aren't you? So why can't I do what I think I need to do for myself? Well, if you want it so badly, that's fine. I don't mind. But I don't want you to get too caught up in it and get skinny. You know how much I love your pudgy shape. Don't worry, I'll just take the weight off. Everything else will stay in place. We finished dinner and continued our conversation on another topic. She was suddenly curious about what I was reading and what the story was about. I told her that I had come across a book where the events were described in the future, and it described a lot of possibilities that our science had not yet reached, and there were many devices that I liked enough to use. And I even thought that if I had enough capital, I could contact the manufacturing engineering industry and give them a couple of ideas for creating gadgets similar to those described in the book, offering them some sponsorship. I got the idea so far in my head that when I went to bed, I couldn't sleep for a long time thinking about it. When I got to the office in the morning, I took some free time and contacted my lawyer and Kifo, and we discussed the idea for a while. It seemed acceptable enough to them, and now all they had to do was contact a company that would agree to my proposal. And in about a week's time, a company agreed to accept my proposal. I told them that their engineers needed to create detailed drawings and a computer screen that showed a model of a gadget that could serve as a great tracking device for our country's military in the future. And while I was busy with my new investment in future production, Bridget, as promised, enrolled in a fitness course. She attended them 3 times a week, and when she returned, she told me what she had been doing and how her progress was going. Of course, it's too early to talk about my results because I just started practicing. But I can tell you that I feel much better and more confident. Don't worry, it won't affect my housework. I still have time to do everything around the house. Yes, she didn't have to do much housework because she didn't work anywhere. She was just a housewife, but at the same time she attended meetings where the ladies got together and created their own club, where they could share their impressions, skills. Sometimes they did knitting, baking, many other women's things, even played bridge sometimes. And she was always content with that. Within a year, the production of my newly invented device was gaining popularity, and sales for it were rapidly increasing. I remained the main shareholder of the company, and having acquired a decent capital, decided to give my wife a car so that she could now go wherever she wanted. But I don't know how to drive. She objected, although she was very happy about my gift. Don't worry about that. I've enrolled you in a driving course. I've heard they teach you how to drive very well and quickly. Besides, your car will be automated with a built-in router. All you have to do is set an address, and the assistant will tell you where to stop and turn. Trust me, even a kid could handle a car like this. Dwayne, you spoil me so much. Thank you so much. I can't thank you enough. So, what about your fitness club? Are you done with that? You know, I'm back in shape, but my trainer insists I keep going to keep in shape. He's such a sweetheart, always helping me with everything. He even recommended me a special diet that will help me cleanse my body of toxins, which will only improve my health. But I think you're already in pretty good shape. So why don't you do something else? Like what? I don't know. You're a great cook. Why don't you open your own restaurant? Bridget thought for a few seconds. She loved cooking, but she wasn't passionate about it enough to start her own business. I don't know. I'm not really into it, and I'm not much of a restaurateur. I'm more of a cook. But you should think about it. I said and got up from the table to leave. Where are you going now? I'm going to read something. Your books again. I made that dessert you like so much. Honey, no offense, But I'm so full, there's no more room for dessert. Maybe a little later. Why don't you leave a piece in the fridge for me? I'll be sure to have some later. I said, and left the kitchen. The evening went on as usual, but I was so engrossed in reading that I didn't realize I'd fallen asleep in the living room chair. Bridget came up to me later to call me to bed, but when she saw how sweetly I slept, she just pulled a blanket from the closet and covered me with it, trying not to disturb my sleep. After a month or so, Bridget agreed to take a driving course, for she liked the car I'd bought her, and she was eager to drive it and drive around the streets of our city. She didn't decide to stop going to fitness, but she went to it much less often, and now she went once a week. But at the same time, she started asking me for more money than I usually gave her, motivated by various unforeseen expenses such as gasoline, maintenance, closet renovation, and much more. I didn't really understand why she needed the money, but I spared nothing for her and always gave her what she asked for. But only later, a couple weeks later, I began to notice that she started to be late on her walks and came home much later than usual. The first time I noticed this was when I had a few scheduled meetings canceled at work and I decided to come home early, buying a bottle of champagne and a box of chocolates that she loved so much. But I waited 3 or 4 hours before she showed up. As I sat in the living room, I could hear her sighing in the hallway. But when she turned the corner and saw me sitting on the couch, her joy waned a little. "Oh, Dwayne, why are you home so early? You usually get home late from work." Can't I come home early? I wanted to give you a nice surprise. But I see you're already happy with everything. How was your day? What made you so happy today? Oh, just hanging out with my friends, telling me some pretty funny stories. That's all. She came in, threw her bag on the table against the wall, and plopped down on the chair across from me. I could tell from her demeanor that she was a little tipsy. Have you been drinking? A little. I told you we went out with some friends. Why? And you got behind the wheel like that? She made an indignant face like I was accusing her of something terrible. Oh, come on. I had a little bit to drink. The cops didn't even stop me. I was driving very carefully. You realize how this could end, don't you? I don't want you to drive drunk. In cases like this, you should call a cab. Oh, come on. You got excited. I thought you were only interested in books. She got up and went upstairs to her room, and as she went up the stairs, I noticed that she staggered a little, and I was worried. I didn't want her to have an accident, even a minor one. This time I took her at her word, hoping it would never happen again, and continued reading the book. I soon finished and went upstairs, hoping that Bridget had thought about what I'd said and that I'd like to discuss the subject with her again. But when I entered the bedroom, I saw that she was just sprawled out on the bed, belly down, arms spread, and not even undressing, asleep. Apparently, she didn't drink as little as she said she did. But I didn't wake her up because I realized that I couldn't talk to her now. I knew perfectly well that it was boring for her to stay at home all the time, and I never forbade her to go out with her girlfriends or visit entertainment centers. But I had never noticed her getting so drunk before. I carefully undressed her. She fell asleep so soundly she didn't even feel it. I put her to bed and went to sleep, hoping that in the morning she would be in better health and I could have a serious talk with her about her behavior and how important her safety was to me. In the morning, I woke up before her. She was still snoozing, not even hearing the alarm clock. I went to the kitchen to make coffee and waited for her to come downstairs. But time passed, and she stayed upstairs. I was about to get ready for work, so I decided to go and wake her up. But when I came in, she wasn't in bed, and the sound of water was coming from the shower room. Without knocking, I opened the door. She was in the shower, behind the curtain. Unashamedly, I opened it and saw her standing there, daydreaming under the running water. When she noticed me, she looked a little perturbed. Dwayne, what are you doing here? She looked at me with her eyes wide open, as if it was the first time I'd seen her naked. Why? Are you embarrassed by me? I was waiting for you to wake up. I need to have a serious talk with you. Okay, I'll be right down. Now let me finish my bath. I left her alone and went downstairs while she finished. I made coffee for her. And when she finally deigned to show up, I started talking to her. Listen, Bridget, I don't mind you spending time with your friends, but the way you came home last night really bothered me. Look, I'm really worried about you, and I don't want anything to happen to you. Oh, come on. It went fine. Yeah, you got lucky this time. But there's no guarantee it'll always be like this. Just promise me you'll never drive drunk. Besides, you seemed to have a little too much to drink last night. I've never seen you like that before. What happened to you? Why are you picking on me? It was a long night. So what? What's the big deal? Doesn't it happen to anyone? I'm not talking about everyone. I'm talking about you and me. We've always been a model family. So maybe it's time to make a change. At least you took your mind off your books and paid attention to me. Bridget, how could you do that? Haven't I been paying enough attention to you? That's it. I've had enough of your lectures. You look like you should be on your way to work. She glanced at the wall clock. Time was really running out, and I had a meeting scheduled for the morning. I didn't argue with her anymore and went to get dressed in my work suit. Time was running out. Bridget gave no more reason to doubt herself and tried to behave herself, though her tardiness in the evenings continued unabated. Every now and then she would come up with different reasons for her late arrival home, whether it was because she's at the store or at practice, or because she was out with her friends again. And even though each of her explanations seemed logical, there was still something about her sudden change that bothered me. And under the impression of the love stories I'd read, I even began to suspect that Bridget was not just hanging out with her friends, but had a new boyfriend. Although I did not understand the reason for this, I always took care of myself and tried to keep myself in shape to always be attractive to his wife. And she always treated me with love and respect. I tried from time to time and so to bring her to a frank confession, but she always kept on her own, and sometimes even began to take offense at me for such interrogations. Throwing criticizing words at me, she just left me in another room, wishing to stop the conversation that bored her. But one day she came home very sad and drunk again. She sat down on the couch and didn't want to start a conversation, realizing that I would probably read her a moral about her behavior again. So what happened this time? I asked the first question, seeing the sadness eating away at her. What can I tell you? I'm ashamed to admit it, but I was on vacation with my girlfriends as usual, and we had a few drinks. But just as I was driving home, a policeman pulled me over and realized I wasn't quite sober. She did stop talking for a few seconds. So, what happened next? I asked, not wanting to continue the silence and her quiet sobs. Yes, what? What? He questioned me for a long time, then asked me to get out of the car, demanded my documents. And then, when he was sure that I had been drinking and driving, he took away my driver's license. She went silent again. I was in no hurry to speak again. Now I needed some time to digest the information. I had warned her, and she had promised me that she would behave carefully and never drive drunk. But what made her break her promise, and with such consequences? Of course I felt sorry for her, but it was her own fault, and I wanted her to realize her mistake. Of course, I could go and negotiate to get her license back, but I wasn't sure she'd go back to her old ways. All right, sweetheart. Now that you're caught, even though I warned you, you'll have to take a cab or a bus. How could I? She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. I'm so used to my car. Be thankful they didn't take it away from you. But I don't like the way you've been drinking so much. Oh, come on. I only had a little bit. It was a friend's birthday and we celebrated. I believe you. But your so-called celebrations have become more frequent. You can see that we've been fighting a lot because of it, right? Do you like it yourself? She just stared at me in silence. Here's what I suggest. I continued, hoping for her understanding. You'll take a course of therapy for alcohol addiction. You know how I hate it when a woman, especially my wife, behaves like that, right? So make up your mind. I left the room, leaving her to think about her future behavior. That night, I resented her so much that I didn't even want to sleep in the same room with her, and that night I went to sleep in another room. Behind the closed door, I could hear her stomping down the hall, cursing herself and the whole situation that had led to this, and also mentioning me for not understanding her and her loneliness. Though I couldn't call her lonely after work, I was reading books, but I always paid attention to her, and she had a lot of friends with whom she often socialized. I didn't understand what she was missing in her life. With these reflections, I thought that it was time for us to have a child, and then she would have something to do, and she would stop her evening adventures. Even though the thought had crossed my mind, I still had to think about it. So I decided to postpone this topic of conversation with her for at least the next few days. Perhaps she would think of something else, though I wanted a child, too, for I needed an heir. But I decided not to rush her into it. A few days passed. For the first couple of days, Bridget kept to herself. But then her adventures continued again. Only now she either came home in a cab or someone drove her home. I was starting to get a little annoyed. I started talking to her about it again and again, but she tried to avoid answering every time. One day, when she came home again in a drunken state, so drunk that she could barely stand, I didn't question her, since her speech was mostly incoherent, and I helped her to the bedroom. Her clothes were soiled this time, so I decided to take her to the bathroom to change her clothes and put her in the shower so she could recover a little. And when I sat her down on the bench in the bathroom and began to take off her dirty clothes, I noticed that she was not wearing any underwear. This angered me, but yelling at her and scolding her was pointless now, so I continued my business and put her in the bathroom and turned on the shower, but only with cold water, hoping that it would bring her to her senses faster. The cold water started to get some results, and soon Bridget was berating me for what I was doing and that she was cold. It's okay. Just bear with it. It'll do you good. I held her under the cold stream for a few more minutes until she began to show signs of adequacy. Only then did I pull her out and wrap her in a towel, taking her to the bedroom. As she continued to shiver slightly and pulled the towel over her, she gave a pitiful voice. What's going on? Why did you pour cold water on me? Oh, it seems our drunkenness can finally speak normally. I took a couple of steps back from her so I could see all of her. Now tell me where you've been and where you got so drunk. What are you talking about? It's the same thing all the time. Yeah. Then why did you come back without your underpants on?
Answer me. Why are you thinking of getting laid on the side? What's wrong with me?
What do you mean, no underpants? What are you talking about? It can't be. I told you. I was out with my friends. I couldn't take it anymore and slapped her. Answer me. Answer me now, before I lose my temper. Who were you with? Fuck you, she said, clutching her cheek with the palm of her hand. Since when did you start hitting women? Since when does my wife fuck anyone? Bridget decided not to answer me anymore, only to send me away when I asked her more questions. I left the room all pissed off, and I decided to find out who she'd been with and how long it had been going on. The next day, I chose a moment and called a few of my acquaintances who could help me in my case. One of them was a former policeman, and the other was just a gangster whom I had once helped in a case and who still remained in my debt. I briefly described to them the task they were to perform for me, naturally promising them a decent reward for it. I had to wait a couple of days for a reply, as it took time to gather information. In the meantime, I forbade my wife to go out at all. But when a man who wasn't a friend of the law, but had a lot of connections and was good at interrogation, he brought me information that Bridget was having an affair with a driving coach. To be honest, I assumed that if she was having an affair, it would be with a fitness club trainer who was attractive. But this one looked like a regular guy, even a little older than her. What could he possibly be attracting her to? Are you sure about this, Rick? I asked him. 100%. He'd confessed it to me in great detail from the beginning. I'm good at getting information out of people. Yeah, I know. That's why I asked you to look into it. Oh, well then, if that's it, I'll be on my way. I don't want to make a big splash around here. Oh, hold on. I stopped him. Knowing all your skills, I have one more thing to do for you. Yeah? What's that? He's interested. I need this man to disappear from the face of the earth so that no one will ever find him. Well, that's something to think about. Don't worry about payment. Just do your job. Here's half. I reached into the safe and pulled out a nice wad of cash. You'll get the rest when the job is done. Rick took the money, looked at it carefully, and agreed to do what I asked. The information I'd learned made me realize I was filled with rage, and there was no way I could do business today. So I asked my secretary to cancel all my appointments and rushed home, filled with anger. Bridget was in the kitchen making pancakes. When I walked in, she realized I was in a bad mood and even freaked out a little. What's wrong, Dwayne? Why are you looking at me like that? And you're still asking. When I asked you who you were out with, what did you say? I told you clearly that I was with my friends. Yeah. Did you have so much fun that your underpants fell off? She just stared at me like I was crazy. I know all about your lover. Just tell me, what do you see in him? He's so unattractive and not rich at all. What was wrong with me? Well, since you know, he's very gentle and tender, not like you. All you love is your books, and I was just like a housekeeper to you. But I took care of you. I always tried to pay attention to you. Have you forgotten that? You're just an ungrateful whore. How could you... You know what? I'm sick of everything. I'm leaving you. I'm done. She threw a pan of boiling oil on the stove. Oh no, you're not leaving that easily. And who are you going to go to? That driver. Forget about him. He'll never see you again. What do you know? He loves me, and I love him too. And you're just an asshole, a bookworm. I was already pissed off, and those words made me even angrier, so I couldn't take it anymore, and I slapped her across the face again. Bridget recoiled, and from the force of my blow started to fall, but trying to grab onto something, there was only a stove with oil spilled on the edge beside her. Her hand slipped and she fell face first into the pan of boiling oil. Brigitte jerked away immediately, but the hot liquid still clung to her skin. I hadn't expected this, and I rushed to her aid, but it was too late to save her beauty. I grabbed a towel, wetting it with tap water, and applied it to my wife's burn, who kept screaming in pain and cursing me for what I had done to her. While she held the cold towel to her face, I called an ambulance. But by the time the ambulance arrived, Bridget began to faint from the pain, and I tried my best to bring her to her senses, but I had little success. When the doctors arrived, my wife was already unconscious. They said it was from painful shock. After doing some medical manipulations on her, they took her to the hospital. I visited her every day. They tried to save her as best they could, but the burns were too severe, and it even damaged her right eye. After a couple of days, she woke up. I tried to talk to her. Bridget, how are you feeling? What do you care? It's because of you. That you're nice. You're confused. You slipped and fell on the slab. The police came to our house and investigated, trying to charge me with domestic violence thanks to a tip from your friends. But they found oil on the floor that you spilled and your footprints as you slipped. So I had nothing to do with it. After wishing her well, I left the hospital. But I never visited her again, having organized a business trip to another city. I met Rick at the train station, and he gave me information and proof that my wife's lover would never be found again, except by archaeologists in a couple of centuries. I paid him as promised and went about my business. When I returned from a business trip that lasted 2 weeks, I learned that Bridget had been discharged from the hospital and had returned home, where I saw her with her face bandaged. She tried to talk to me and asked me to forgive her, but I had no desire to see her again. Soon I filed for divorce. But where would I go with a face like that and blind in one eye? Dwayne, I'm so sorry. I made a mistake. But should I be punished for it? You dare ask for anything. You didn't just cheat on me. You lied to my face. And believe me, I don't care what happens to you now.